Welcome to the Got Any Cows podcast. If you want to learn all you can about the beef cattle industry, this is the podcast for you. My name is Seth Christensen. My company has sent beef cattle genetics to 45 of the 50 states and 12 countries around the world. I've had the chance to learn from some of the best and brightest in the beef cattle industry, and I invite you to join me for those conversations here on the Got Any Cows podcast. I am happy to be here today with my friend Paul Marchant. We're here at Marchant Ranch in Oakley, Idaho. So if you will, Paul, give us a little bit of an intro on who you are and where we are, if you would, please.
Well, I'd like to keep that a secret. Sometimes that's a little scary. Yeah, we're here actually east of Oakley, Idaho, in the basin. We like to say we're in the suburbs.
Okay.
But the prettiest place in Cassia County. We like to be here. Like to be from here. Yeah. But I'm not a native. I have been in Oakley for 30 years. Come on, 31 years. My parents have been here for 40 years.
Okay.
I grew up down in Summit County, Utah. We kind of got urbanized out of that country. Right. So, beautiful country, as you may know. As a matter of fact, so I grew up in Peoria, which is about 3 miles from Oakley. Okay. So I moved from Oakley to Oakley.
Okay. That's awesome. And see, now, Lee Marchant is still down that way, so still a chunk of the family down towards Peoria.
So, Lee's actually in Wyoming now.
Is he? I was in my head.
He's over in by Powell, that country.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So Lee is my first cousin's son.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So I went to BYU, met my wife there. We were in animal science, and we graduated from BYU, and I managed a ranch out in Nevada for a few years, and then I moved to another place out in southern Utah. And in the meantime, my family had come here to Oakley. And the way I ended up here was I took the extension agent job in Burley. It was kind of a temporary deal at the time. But I've been here since 1995, and I've always done other things besides here to help my dad on the ranch. And then as time's progressed, it's been more necessary that I spend most of my time here. But I currently kind of still work with Progressive Publishing. So it's Progressive Cattle Magazine, Progressive Forage Magazine. I currently write 4 columns in 4 different magazines.
So you're in Progressive Cattle, which is the one I'm most familiar with. What are the other publications that you're in? And is your column Irons in the Fire across all of them?
Irons in the Fire, and it's a set. I have to write a different one for every magazine. I mean,
really?
It's Irons in the Fire, but it's a different.
But you have to write 4 columns for 4 magazines.
4 columns a month. So yeah.
Wow.
So I do, and I'm really good at deadlines. So so that is a little problematic sometimes. But yeah. So Progressive Cattle. Progressive Forage, and then Progressive Cattle Canada.
Oh, okay. It's a separate publication for Canada.
Yep, and that's just kind of a new venture in it's been going for about 1.5 years now. Okay. And so that's been kind of fun being involved in that. And then the Ag Proud Idaho magazine, which is kind of the general ag for the state of Idaho.
So I'm going to throw a little bit of a wrench at you here, Paul. I didn't preface this one, but while we're talking publications, this is a question that's just come up in the last week. I've talked with a series of different publications, and you would know better than anyone, advertising is an ever-evolving thing as far as, print versus digital versus, and there's a million ways to look at any and all of it. What keeps you engaged in print relative? I mean, everyone's always talking print versus digital or the appropriate media mix. Talk print, and I apologize to be shooting right off the one edge, but talk print advertising, if you would, because I'm educating myself every day on
That's an interesting subject. It really is. So I got involved with Progressive Publishing in 2010, and that's when Progressive Cattle was just starting. Kind of the mothership of the Progressive family is Progressive Dairy. Okay. And they've been around, I want to say 40 years or something. And they were just starting out with Progressive Cattle. And so I started out when I was hired on there as ad sales. Okay. That's what I did. And then when the first issue came out, they asked me if I'd write a column. I said, yeah, I can probably do that. And so the rest is history, as they say.
Okay.
But even back then, 2010, which doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but was quite a while ago, the mantra was, print is dead. Why in the world are you people starting a print magazine? Yeah. And it's the Levitt family out of Jerome, Idaho. They're nationwide magazines, international, but it's right there in Jerome.
But it's right out of Jerome. Okay.
And it seems that there are a lot of naysayers, but it was really interesting to be part of that on the ground floor of that Progressive Cattle magazine and see how that worked. And I mean, I'd never been in publishing before, but I don't think it'll come to surprise to any of your listeners that, the farming community, the ag community still likes their print. They really do. I mean, and that's due to a lot of factors. I mean, the age and of most cattlemen and most farmers is a little older. My age.
But you're not a day over 25, right?
Yeah. Well, a couple days older.
Yeah.
But that comes into factor for sure. But even that, more than just the demographics of the age. I mean, I think people ag people like to hold something like their magazine, and that's an oversimplification. Sure. But I was in ad sales, and most of my sales were to bull sales and that kind of thing, because that was kind of my people. I mean, there, and I didn't get I had the opportunity to sell to equipment manufacturers and all that kind of thing, but I was a lot more comfortable with the cowboys, and I was kind of the only one. Most people in the publishing in that company, some of them have an ag background, but most don't. And I was coming straight from the.
Well, you're actively running cows at the same time, I'm assuming. I mean, have you been running cows throughout as you've been working with Progressive?
So the whole time, and so that was kind of a natural fit. And I'm honestly not the best salesman in the world. I mean, but I did okay. I mean, I actually, I led in sales for a couple months.
Oh, really?
But those months were bull sale months.
There you go.
So anyway, but since I've been there, there's always been that. Well, is print gonna die? And then here just the Progressive Cattle Canada just started that a year and a half ago. Yes. And there is, I mean, it's not like people are clamoring for it, but there's a niche for it. And as I've been there, it's obviously progressed. So there's to more digital. Sure. But people still want the print magazine.
That's interesting. I apologize to kind of be just veering right off, or asking a separate question. But as you explain your background, both in the cattle and here at Marchant Ranch, but then your connection to Progressive Publishing, I mean, it does connect right to a conversation I've had in the last week, and that we're analyzing in-house. How much advertising budget do we allocate to print versus to digital and there's so many platforms in all of the above, and or just going with strictly organic, i.e. less at total ad spend or no ad spend in different spaces, and it's an ever evolving subject that I don't have the answer to. Right. I'm always looking for that.
I think I improve? It's really interesting, and it's kind of hard because like Progressive's digital footprint is not huge, and most of the business is still the print, but out of necessity, obviously they've had to evolve, and it's hard. What avenue do you take? Social media, you got social media or website and all that, and you've seen some poor stuff. I mean, there's some bad stuff, and so it's you want to do quality, and so I think, and Progressive's business model has always kind of been to cautiously expand if it's there, and so I think they've been, for the most part, they've been really wise about how they've done that. It's been fun to be part of Progressive Cattle since the beginning, to see how that, we started as nobody knew who we were to now it would only beef national magazine now that's in print. I mean, there's still drovers and beef are still there in the digital format, but they don't have the print at all. And so it's been fun to be part of that and see the growth and learn too.
Right. No, and it's interesting, and that's just like today. Like we were talking, even being out in the cattle and stuff like that. This is a trip that I've meant to make, to be here with you. Probably for the last handful of years. Because it's always a matter of I guess informing ourselves or learning, or like you're talking about this experience with Progressive. As you're there, you're learning. Or having different experiences, or running into how did that company evolve or change or stay relevant. Or stay plugged in, and that's a lot of my visit today has been really fun, sitting and looking at cattle and talking cattle and seeing, okay, what worked, even out in the pens, looking at the animals, this worked and this wasn't as good, or this hit what we wanted to have happen, this wasn't as much what we wanted to have happen. And there's nothing, I think that one of the takeaways for me, both from this conversation about print, but also from being out in the pens and looking at the cattle, is that there's no way to know without having tested it, right? I mean, and it's the same whether you're testing, your media mix or your advertising mix, or it's the same whether we're testing this bloodline, this bull, this cow, that cow. And that's, I mean, I think that's how we learn and how we iterate. But
Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point, and it applies to both, the publishing world that we're talking about and what you're doing and what you have done. I think a lot of times you see startup businesses that just explode overnight, and it seems great in the moment, and then you see they fade away like a star. And so Progressive Publishing's business model, for example, has been, like I said, cautious growth, and they concentrate. They want their magazine to go to people who are really in the cow business. So they work really hard at, and I think harder than most magazines or most publications, in finding who their subscribers are and keeping them. I mean, there's I think there's some publications that may have a broader reach, but Progressive wants to hit this certain demographic. So there's just under 60,000, I think, subscribers, which is sizable, but it's not everyone, and you can chase numbers and that's in whatever business. And fall off the cliff.
Right. Well, and I think that's been an interesting thing, even like with this podcast. Jacob and I were talking on the way up here, about wanting to hit the right people. Like, it's not so much about just saying like, well, we went viral or we got millions of views, or what I mean, all these people saw it. Frankly, like the highest view counts of YouTube videos, for example, they're all, without exception, people playing video games. Which I'm not selling cows to people playing video games, right? So I guess the point being, like, even if it does, it's viral or has a huge view count, if they're not the right viewers, right? Or it is only people playing video games, like, I don't care if I only ever have 10 people that listen to what you and I have to say on this podcast. I'd rather have the right 10 than the wrong million,
Well, you might get the wrong people. So I was TikToking for a while, and I hit the wrong, I got hacked. So I've been off TikTok for like a year.
Right. No, and it is.
But that's kind of a metaphor, if you will. You just chasing as many as you can. That's not. You need to hit the right people. I think that's a real important lesson, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think it'll tie to, like we talked about, as far as kind of a central topic that we'll talk about today is going to be kind of the commercial fit for Akaushi bulls. So I'm here today delivering Akaushi bulls to you that aren't necessarily going to go out and breed purebred or full-blood Akaushi cows. They're going to go into a commercial setting. So back up into your story where I took us off on this side road, I mean? The GPS said I go on this four-wheeler trail, so away I went.
Well, if you followed the GPS to get here, it probably was good trying to do that to you, wasn't it?
I am glad you sent me instructions. We'd have been wandering for like half an hour on the GPS, but your instructions were good. And also like worthy of their own like little call. They were really funny. I enjoyed how you wrote them. So we're sitting here at Marchant Ranch in Oakley, Idaho. You'd mentioned you came here you'd been down into Summit County, Nevada, Southern Utah, and then you're here to the home place. Walk us through, I guess, what Marchant Ranch is, or like what is the operation, I guess, at the point you came here, and then what does that become to today, as far as what is Marchant Ranch?
Yes.
Am I even calling that right? I'm seeing MR and assuming that's for Marchant Ranch, or is that for something different, the brand here?
There's a story behind that. It's actually originally it was Marchant Roundy. So, but that from the Utah roots, but yeah, Marchant Ranch. Okay. It's a hot mess a lot of times if they don't ask me what it is.
I'm glad it's not just me.
That's what it is.
I have the same problem.
So what was interesting? So my folks had come up here, and we were just off on one, and it was, like not a real lucrative thing. It like a lot of agriculture, and it wasn't like I could come up here. And I've got siblings too, and actually I had younger siblings that were still at home when my parents moved up here. But it was nice to come up. The opportunity presented itself for us to come up here, and it's not like we're going to go inherit the ranch. It wasn't anything like that. Right. But as things have developed, I've been here, and it's out of necessity I've had to stay, and I've always had another job, but it's kind of evolved as things have gone along. But so we run we're under 400 cows right now, and a lot of our ground is leased out to some farmers here in Oakley. And that's kind of out of necessity too. Is like when it was just my dad was here by himself. When I wasn't here full time, and so we kind of decreased the cow herd and to what we could run on the mountain and then run here. And so right now we're running 300 something cows, and so the Akaushi deal is kind of interesting. How I it's been a great thing for us. I mean, it's saved us in a lot of ways. It has been just tremendous. And I want to say, and part of me, I think I was telling you earlier, Seth, part of me wants to not tell anybody because it's a good secret.
It's a good secret.
It's a good secret. It has worked great for us. And my connection to it was with through Progressive.
So did they you were with Progressive?
So that's how I met. I met Bubba Bain, who was the executive vice president, or whatever his title was, and struck a real good relationship with. And I'm great friends with Bubba to this day. And I remember quizzing him about it, and then they started advertising it.
Right. Well, I think you probably got him to the Idaho Cattlemen's Association, which would be where I first met Bubba and or heard of Akaushi prior to ever delving into him. But I met him.
Actually, that's where I first met him.
Oh, that was where he first met him. Was there in Idaho Cattlemen's.
And I was quizzing him, and of course, I remember really well the conversation because what are these cattle? And he showed you breed these Akaushi, and I look at the pictures and like they don't look like Wagyu,
right?
And I had a kind of a bad feeling about Wagyu.
Anyone that's been in cattle does.
So you know why? I mean, I want them to look like cattle,
Right.
And I've been around, so I had some people I've kind of worked with that had someone I wasn't really impressed with. I mean, not the beef is
wonderful.
Great.
I always told people I'll eat it with
never
you,
question that.
but I'm not breeding Korean Jersey crosses. Like I'm just not.
Right.
I got people I love and respect who have them. Right, I'm just not going to be one of them. I
don't want to disparage the breed.
No.
But so and he kind of had some pictures, and he was telling me. He's kind of, throwing the party line out there, of course. And so I said, well, what will a quarter breed blood do? And they'd probably do. And anyway, tell me how great they'd marble. Yeah. And I toyed with the idea about maybe trying that. And I put it off for a year or so. Yeah. And looking back now, I thought, I wish I hadn't done that. Sure. But we ended up, we had 300 heifers that we were breeding. And our intent was to breed them and sell them. And kind of a story for another day. It was maybe the biggest wreck I've ever been in was those heifers. But we ended up, because we were going to breed them and sell them, and we ended up keeping them and calving them. And
calving 300 heifers is calving a lot of heifers.
And it was like we synchronized them and bred them, and it was like, let's look in the Old Farmer's Almanac and see what's going to be the worst possible 2-week period you can. And it was awful. The weather and the wind howling, snow, and then we got scours in them, and that year we lost. I mean, that was with the heifers and the calves. We lost 100 calves. It was awful. But anyway,
there's nothing less fun than. Well, I say to parallel your story. I've never had it happen to me with 300, but I was doing 75 heifers. In spring of 17 with Snowmageddon, and we had 6 feet of snow, and then a day of 60 where it all melted, and then it went to -20 for a week, and they all calved. And I feel it deep in my soul. There's nothing less fun. So
you did your homework, so knew when to calve.
That's exactly right. We were on top of it. Let me tell you.
So a bunch of those heifers, going back to it, we'd bred to Akaushi.
Okay.
And I was going to sell them, and then we ended up keeping them, and so we kept them. And so that was my first. So that was, I want to say 2012. I think
2012 would be this. So this is Akaushi enter the scene here in Oakley, Idaho. 2012. It should be kind of where you're at in the timeline. Okay,
and then we so we didn't have too many. I mean, I want to say 40 or 50. I can't remember.
Sure.
And I think we marketed those to AgriBeef.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. So AgriBeef would be taking them through that Snake River Farms brand for the finished product for a Wagyu beef product, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Which that is, it's one of the benefits that Akaushi and it's you've heard it said a million times just like I have, but all Akaushi are Wagyu. Yep. But not all Wagyu are Akaushi, and so it opens that market door without, frankly, having to wreck your cows. But I shouldn't disparage the black Wagyu. I'm gonna have to apologize to all my black Wagyu friends. Yeah. But anyway, no, you are able to market them that way through that.
So that's anyway. It wasn't much. And the funny thing is, those calves. There's a feedlot here in Oakley that's where they were feeding them.
Yeah.
And
is that Matthews or another one?
No, it was. It used to be Bedke feedlot. It was Pickett's.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
So Matthews is just right down the road here.
Right. Yeah.
So how Matthews got introduced to Akaushi was when I bred those first heifers. Yeah. I had those heifers in their feedlot, and they're like, "What in the world are you doing?" And so they investigated, and so they're a bigger player than I am. But,
sure. Well, and have they stayed in it ever since, or did they just get in and have done some of it? They're still in it. Yeah, that's what they do.
They're still in it. And they're feeding a bunch of Akaushi cattle. I mean, most of what's in their feedlot now is is Akaushi.
That's sure what they look like driving by. It'd be Akaushi and Akaushi
and
crosses.
some Akaushi Holsteins, and
Yep.
so they've been great ambassadors for the breed, I think. So anyway, I keep diverging off.
No,
my
you're
original
it's
story.
good one, and that's the thing is it's like honestly in most of these podcast episodes, I always have in my head a loose idea of like, oh, we want to touch on these things in more or less in timeline order, but without fail, there's something that comes up along the way, and usually the most value that I ever bring in any of the conversations is as we take all the detours off of like, well, but this or that or whatever, because it's true. It's just sitting down to have a conversation, but I feel like there's a lot, as we look at what the podcast does, you and I could sit and have the conversation. Yeah, I learn a little, you learn a little, we swap experiences, swap stories, right? But I could have 200 other people that I could try to individually, relay some of what I've learned from our conversation. But it's a lot better if they could just be a fly on the wall and hear it. And that's all it is. So don't feel bad about the detours is what I'm saying.
Jacob can edit, can he?
Oh, yeah, Jacob can clean up all the bad stuff. Yeah. He'll take out all of me cussing the black wax.
Yeah, there you go. And so I'm trying to remember how. So the next couple of years, then we sold to Heartbrand.
Okay, yeah.
Sold feeder cattle,
right,
and they shipped them to Texas.
Yep.
And then, so I probably shouldn't tell all my trade secrets. But the way, so since, I'm trying to think I can't remember how many years we've been so we're feeding the cattle ourselves.
Right.
Ourselves, when I say ourselves, we've got the guy in Oakley, my brother-in-law, kind of got a little satellite feedlot. And so Ken Black kind of feeds them for us. But, so we've been selling them to feeder cattle, taking like 7 weights and selling them to Heartbrand. And I think I did that for a couple of years. And it got kind of late one year. And so kind of out of negligence, I thought, I think these cattle are getting kind of too big. And so I called up Jordan or Jojo, I can't remember. And anyway, so we end up feeding them.
Sure.
Feed them out. And so that worked really well for us.
Yeah.
And so we've been doing it ever since.
So you take them all the way to
All the
they're
way to
ready.
finish,
They're
yep.
ready for harvest.
But
you do sell them live. So you sell live fat cattle. Is what you sell. Yep. Okay. Yep.
And that's been that's just been a great program for us. And it's like I say, I kind of want to keep some of the secret because I don't want people to get involved because it's
don't want them flooding your market, right?
It's been great. And Jordan Beeman and Jojo, they treat us great. I mean, it's been a great program. And
They've both been on the podcast, actually, both Jordan.
Oh yeah, so they've been just super for us. And like I say, I kind of fell bass backwards into feeding the cattle, but it was so neat because we those first cattle we'd get the carcass data back, and I remember the very first bunch we did. This is one of my proudest moments as a cowman.
Sure.
I was off and I in Texas somewhere, I can't remember. I was off on a trip for Progressive, and Bubba Bain had tried to call me. Okay. And I had my phone, and like 2 or 3 times he called me, and an hour later called me again, and I finally listened to the message. He said, "You got to call me back." And it was right after I'd shipped cattle, and I was kind of scared.
Sure. Like
crap,
did something happen? Right. Yeah.
And he was so excited because we'd shipped, I think maybe just 1 load, but he said, "I got to tell you that we just killed your cattle, and that is the best group of half bloods we've ever killed."
Love it.
And I mean, it was
absolutely.
That was just amazing. He said it was amazing,
Absolutely.
and so I was kind of hooked before then, but that kind of sold me, and you're obviously a little pride goes in there.
You ought to be proud of that.
And an interesting thing is though, so my cattle are limousine based, which is we're not most people around here
lean limousine.
And I'd always I ran a feedlot for so when I guess I didn't tell you that part when I came here I was the extension officer for a while, and then Dragus Enterprises hired me, and they just bought a little feedlot over here south of Burley, and so I was running that feedlot and the cow outfit. They were just getting into the cow business, so it's the ground floor is kind of interesting to be in. So we went from feeding, the yard was just they fed like 1,000 cows when they bought it, just a kind of cow yard, and then to when I left, I was there for 7, almost 8 years. We're feeding 15,000, and so I had always been. The reason I'm telling that part of the story is so I had some experience feeding cattle, and I was always of the mind through that experience that yield is what paid. Yeah, and I felt pretty strongly about that.
Sure.
So I've been breeding limousine cattle.
Yeah, it's going to push you continental
for 20 years.
Yield. Right, absolutely.
And that's kind of what I thought that's what paid, and it did. It did. I mean, we had the numbers to back it.
You're not wrong. Yeah, for that time frame, especially. Yeah,
and it's funny to see how things have changed. Cattle have got to grade now. Right. You've got to have quality. Right. So back to what I was originally going to say, you wouldn't think it's kind of counterintuitive to think that limousine based cows would
With
produce
Marble well.
those kind of. So
yes.
it just seemed to nick well, and those cattle. I mean, we've just had tremendous. Like, I don't think we've had a load ever go under 60% prime.
It's awesome. Well, and like you mentioned, you're not taking them very heavy.
No, I'm not.
Either.
I'm not feeding them for 3 years.
Right.
And we're taking them to 1,400 pounds, and so we run in pretty rough country, and so when we're kind of light, but we go straight to the feedlot when we wean. We're weaning in like November, and then we go straight to the feedlot.
So what are they going to have for a normal start weight if they're going to come off relatively light? So
we're probably averaging under, and I would like to say, like everybody says, oh yeah, we calve in 45 days, and we got all these parameters.
Everyone I've ever talked to magically calves every cow in 45 days, weans only 8 weights. You know,
and just like when you buy a pregnant cow in the sale yard, bred to a Cavanese black bull.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Every time. Right.
But anyway,
I know what you mean.
Anyway, so it'd be interesting to talk about that whole deal, like my philosophy and when we calve and how we calve. But it's longer than I want it to be. But so that we're averaging right around 5, maybe even a little under 5 when we go into the feedlot.
Yep. And so you're calving now in late March, and then so you'd be calving March, April primarily.
I start. March 1st is my calving.
So so you're calving March, April for the bulk of them, at least the front edge of them, and then you're going to pull those calves and put them in the lot in October, November.
So November is usually going, and so that's
November to the lot.
So that's kind of our operation where we're kind of beholden to where we run in summer. We run on the Forest Service. We have Forest Service permit.
And you're going to run some tough kind of, that's the other thing. People always want to talk about what they wean, but they don't want to talk about the fact that they spent the whole time in a corn bunk, or being creek fed or whatever.
And
else.
So we've got that window. I've got to have calves that can travel. Yep. So I got to have some age on them. I mean, I would calve in April or even later if I could. Sure. But I like to get the bulls in at least for one cycle before I go on the mountain, because there's always we turn the bulls in like the 20th of May, and so that's the calf 1st of March, and I and they're not. I wish they were all bred up early, but it's great to because when I go on that mountain, there's always no matter what you're doing, there's always a lull in your calves then on the mountain. So I don't know if the bulls got to find the cows, and then it's a stressful time, all of that stuff. So anyway, so we're weaning. We're not great big huge calves when they go in, and so we're killing them at like the bulk of them around 14. The tail ender heifers are going to be, I'm not implanting those heifers, so
they're all natural.
So my heifers like I just as a matter of fact. So here we're in March, and just last week I sent the last dozen head. I put a load together with Matthews, and so that was like the tail ender heifers, and they averaged like 12 and a half.
Yep.
But the point is, we're doing it conventionally. We're not on some.
Well, and I think it's valuable insight, because like you and I mentioned, I mean, people can I always say, and people always want to talk about the one time they had one thing go wildly high, fantastic, whatever, and or even just talking about more conventional breeds, like if we're talking Shars or Limmies or Sims or whatever, and if the target's just to finish them fast, gas, you know what I mean? And if they're weaning at 7 or 8, and then we're trying to chop their head off by the time they're just over a year old or whatever, it's a different program. And I think that's one of the challenges for people that are new to Akaushi. They're coming in, and everyone they talk to, say they talk to an extension agent. And if the extension agent, with zero bad intent or anything like that, but their baseline is conventional cattle and conventional canes and conventional implant protocols and conventional feed protocols, and it's not tailored necessarily to an individual ranch, which, like you mentioned, your calving season is dictated by the mountain. Some of how you breed or how you're going to calve is dictated by that. Some of how you're going to finish them, and that's unique to you and your ranch. But then breeding Akaushi too, just having realistic expectations for the Akaushi cattle and what the Akaushi will do. You can provide benchmarks that someone not running Akaushi wouldn't understand.
So a thought comes to mind when you say that. Yeah. So when I told you how we kind of involved with Matthews a little bit, and they're my neighbors, and so when they were introduced to Akaushi when I was breeding my heifers over there, and Matthews do things right. I mean, they're smart people, and they figure stuff out. Yeah. And I remember Eugene came over to me, and they questioned you about maybe we'll run some Akaushi, and they took their questions and what they're going to do to kind of an accounting firm and to analyze what we do. And he showed me the letter that came back, and the letter came back and goes, we wouldn't recommend this because well, they may grade well, and you might get some premium there. You're going to lose something with your weaning weight. And anyway, it was like the result of their investigation was, no, don't do it. Obviously, there was more to it than that, and Matthews went ahead and did it. And so the point being, it depends on who's looking and what their experience is, and do they have any authority, for lack of a better word, to talk about Akaushi or whatever the subject is.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, if you talk to somebody, if your whole basis for comparison or all of the information you ever had was, I mean, if you're talking to somebody in Nebraska that's running high octane Angus and or Sim Angus or whatever, and the whole target of the whole finishing program, like we're going to make them go 4, like they're going to gain north of 4 pounds a day. And you come into Akaushi and that's your expectation. I don't anticipate that being, I'd love to say that every single one of them is going to gain 4, but I don't think that's a realistic expectation for a benchmark, you know? And it's not to say, well, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, like, well, maybe they're not going to gain 4, so now the breed isn't any good whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're breeding them, I'm breeding them. There's a reason we're doing that, but it's not that we're targeting 4 or 5 pound daily gains in the lot. So talk about the lot a little bit. You're talking about they're going into that lot in November, right? And so they'd be going in, they're an 7-8-month-old kind of a calf. What does it look like as far as getting those cattle received and getting them going? And then what do you see for normal gains and normal finish timeline? And then what does that look like as far as how you sell them and ship them and where they go?
I'm
jumping all over.
I just hope I get I hope I can keep my thoughts together, because I've got all sorts of things that are coming to mind. Like number one was, I would like to tell everyone that my cat, like the first loads I ship out are always the best.
Sure.
And I like to say, they all do this.
To show everybody. Yes, exactly.
But as opposed to like this last one I just shipped out, some the tail end or lighter weight heifers, and obviously their ADG wasn't spectacular,
not exciting to look at.
But I still, I felt pretty good that I got $3,400 a head for
Absolutely. You can't feel too bad about that.
But so there's that. I think you need to be honest with yourself, what you're doing. Yep. And so where we feed them, Ken Black has got a little yard. He's been feeding cattle for a long time, right there, just a little yard there in Burley, and they run cattle over in Alamo too. Yeah. But Ken's really old school. Yeah. But really good, and I've learned a lot. I've had some experience feeding cattle, and so, but Ken's different, and his old school approach has really worked well for these cattle, and it's been, and his big deal is energy. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's that may sound oversimplified, and of course you need energy, but he's has different sources. He's got some byproducts and everything, but Ken just does he does as good a job feeding cattle as anyone I've ever seen, I think. Mm-hmm. And so I feel safe that my cattle are with him. Right. And the yard where we've got them is my brother-in-law's just got a little yard there, and Ken comes and feeds them, and it's not the best conditions in the world, Sure. So we put them in there as calves, and as long as it's not news to anyone, as long as we can keep the pens clean and stuff, they do well. And that's one thing. But Ken has talked about how kind of some shitty conditions in there, and they're wading in water. I'm sorry,
sure.
But the cattle have always performed really well. I mean, consistently. Yeah. I mean, not. I'm not getting 5 pounds a day. I'm not saying that.
Right. Well, and I think again, it's realistic expectations, because it's one of those things. I mean, just like you talk about. I mean, the condition of the pen can impact the gain of the cattle. And again, it's one of those, like, we'd all love to only talk about, like, well, this is the pen I had that did the best there ever was, right? Or the gain I had the best there ever was, or the grade I had that's best there ever was. But something like, hey, we're talking manure management here, right? And that can pull that gain back. Nobody wants to talk about, like, holy crap, it takes a ton of time and a ton of effort and a ton of logistics to get the crap gone. You know what I mean? Like, right. I'm working on this right now. I mean, at my place, it's kind of been my manure management plan has been to not have one. You know what I mean? For an extended period. Right. And then pretty soon you realize, like, no, you need to figure out, like, where is this manure going to go? Like, who's going to haul it on what truck to what location, when, you know what I mean? And that right. is a component that, like I said, I mean, all of us would love to only ever talk about the steak on the plate, but, like, there is going to be some manure somewhere between, you know what I mean, acquiring right. a calf and consuming a steak, right? And anyway, I think it's a valid point that it's like, if you get to where it's one of a million things that need done, and it may not get done perfectly every single time, and understand that, like, that can throttle that gain a little bit for it. But even so, they've done well for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if it is imperfect as life is or living things tend to be. You know?
And well, it's funny because I was just settled up with the can here a week or so ago.
Yeah.
And it hurts right now. That's a huge check right now.
Oh, that feed bill is a big bill.
And I was talking with him, and I don't think we're not for the Akaushi program. I don't think we could realistically year after year make it work. Right. Feeding custom feeding cattle. And so, but the Akaushi makes it work, and we've done. I mean, it's been phenomenal for us. It really has. And I'm constantly, and I tell you, honestly, I'm scared to death every time I ship a load. I'm thinking, what if these don't perform well?
Right. What if the call from Bubba's, or from Jordan, or Jordan was like, hey, this set didn't do anything.
Right.
Right.
And so, but we've been really blessed. I was gonna say lucky. We've been blessed that it's been great for us. Almost every step of the way. I mean, you have your little wrecks, of course, but it's, and I honestly, if we can make this work, and like I said, I don't want to tell anyone, but if we can make this work, any idiot can. So.
I don't think you're selling yourself short there, but so looking at, I mean, as you're feeding them in that lot, what is a realistic? I mean, given they're non-implant cattle, so we need to throttle some expectation there. This is a non-conventional breed, so we're going to throttle some expectation there. Like it isn't necessarily going to be Angus rate of gain or Sim rate of gain or Continental rate of gain. Right. But what is reasonable if you're talking a range, right? The front edge is going to hit about here. The tail enders are going to be about there. What do you think's realistic for what you do?
I would like to say 4, but I would say 3 is kind of what if I can hang around 3.
Sure.
That's kind of where I'm.
Truthfully, I feel like you're doing pretty good. Like I think honestly, in a lot of cases, and it comes down to a million factors. Where's a person at? What kind of feed do they have access to? Do they have a custom feeder? Like a Ken Black that happens to be able to get them to that 3 mark. Like that'd be wonderful, if we could consistently be at 3. But honestly, in a lot of cases, like if there's people that either just don't have the feed or don't have the resources or are turned out to sticks and expecting them to just magically do stuff, it's one. Or if people are just barely starting to figure out how to feed cattle at all, or they're doing it all very much by hand, or don't have some kind of an established program, it might be 2. You know what I mean? And now you're saying like, hey, if we're feeling like we're pretty comfortable with a well put together, established, thought through program, and 3's within the realm of reason, right? Right. But it's probably still not going to be 4 as it sits today.
So like I like to say, if they're not hitting 2.5, then I'm pretty disappointed. But then you got things like you talk about all the factors you have to take in. So like I hate having to deal with heifers and the calves of heifers because they're dinks. They're always dinks. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing, but my heifers' calves are always dinks.
It's not just you.
And so you throw them in there too. And that's another thing that's going to bring them way down. They're dinks when they go in, and they're not going to perform that well.
Sure. Yep. No, and I think just it's important for people to have, I guess, a realistic handle on what is a normal baseline. You know what I mean? And normal, and this too. I talk to people all the time that'll come on tours to the ranch to come look through cattle there in Weston. That quite often I feel like in Japanese cattle at large, this is black Wagyu, red Wagyu, Akaushi, people get the feeling like, we have to do it exactly how the Japanese do because these are Japanese, so we got to do it their way. Yep. And I'm like, listen, like the Japanese slice this stuff into itty bitty thin slices, sear it on a hot plate and eat it. Like the Japanese don't eat a big old plate of ribeye. You know what I mean? And just understanding like this is a and that's fine. If you want to do it exactly if you want to be the equate version of Japan, be my guest. Like I don't care, but I think that it's important to understand that each ranch is inherently individual. You know what I mean? Each ranch is inherently you talked about the mountain here. That's a big piece of the individuality of this ranch and as to how you calve and how you feed and how you run, right? That's a significant component of your operation that is distinct from mine, right? And I think everyone, as they establish what is a realistic benchmark, whether that's for what their genetics will do, what their feed program will do, what that steak on the plate's going to be like, I think it's important for people to understand we are dealing with living, breathing creatures, and there are a million things that are going to impact it. But I think it's helpful to have these benchmarks from someone in Akaushi, not just, I guess, call it industry standard benchmarks.
Well, right? And I think, the beef industry is becoming more and more, isolated or unique, I think, among any industry, but in particularly agriculture, in that we can still, each ranch individually can be much different than another ranch, and we're still making that work. They're not, we're not so vertically integrated like everything, and that's great that we can. I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
I'm so grateful that we still live that lifestyle like that, because I'm what I'm doing is not the same as someone in Iowa, or whatever.
Yep. Well, and it's if you're just looking to make cheap protein, right? Chicken and pork, we're not going to compete with the feed efficiency of a bird or a pig. Like we're just not. And so I think that there's something to be said for leaning into the individuality of beef and what you can do to that flavor profile and even the final beef eating experience can and will be impacted by all these pieces we're talking about, by how you bred them, how you fed them, where you raised them, when you fed them, how you fed, all these things are going to change it. And I think sometimes we want so badly to just homogenize it all to be identical. And I understand, consistency, especially in scaled programs, or consistency within a program is important. We talked about trying to, bring them all more towards center or have a consistent product. But if all I do is make my stuff the exact same as what's coming out of Japan, then why in the Sam Hill would someone not just buy it from Japan? Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely.
I think it's okay to lean into that individuality of your program, and this is how you do it, and this is the steak you put on the plate, or or the fat steer you send down the road.
And you and I talked off air a little bit about how the individual breeds have kind of gotten lost. I think they're coming back, but everything. And I'm not disparaging Angus cattle by any means.
Sure, but everyone wants to be Angus right now. Make them all the exact same as Angus. Yep.
Right, and so when I buy a limousine bull, I don't want an Angus bull. Right. I want the things that the limousine breed has to offer, and I bought limousine bulls that are Angus bulls. Right. Yep, so I think you guys need to be selective about that. But kind of coming back around to at least our deal, we're pretty confident that we know what our cattle are going to do, and that's what Akaushi is probably one of the things I've been most impressed with, is that at least the final product has been really consistent, and like for all these other reasons you've talked about, that's not as easy to do as just turn your cow out and sell the calf.
Right. Oh, for sure. So your cattle are going into the lot in November. You're gonna put them on feed with Ken. He's gonna get them to do. 3 would be the goal. I'm sure you'd have some under. I'm sure you'd probably have some to go over. But 3'd be the goal on what you're trying to get them to gain. When it comes time to market them, do you have those cattle locked in way in advance? Are you marketing them open cash market? Like, how do you go about merchandising those cattle? Because that's another common stumbling block I see. Absolutely. Is how do we go about merchandising these cattle? Like, what do you do now, and has that changed over time, or how do you merchandise them?
So I'm marketing them through the Heartbrand program. And I put a lot of trust in. Honestly, I do. I put a lot of trust in those people, and Jordan has been great. And so, if I was completely honest, I'd say I'm trusting Jordan to treat me right, and that's and they always have. And so that's what
makes a deal repeatable. You know what I mean? So, if it bit you, you'd be looking at different options.
And so,
but it's worked for you.
So it depends on the price we receive is dependent on what the market's doing.
What Cattlefax is doing. Yep.
And so that's, and then we get the premiums, and it's been just. And it's always worked well for us, and we haven't lost our shirts yet. Right.
No, and that's been a positive thing.
So so that kind of brings to mind another thing. When we first started this, I wasn't. So I've got most of my cows now have some Akaushi blood in them. Yeah. And it's funny how things evolve over the years, and it hasn't been that long, but I wasn't. That wasn't my intent. Right. I was just going to make it strictly a terminal deal. Yeah. But partly because of who we are in our size. I've had to keep some of those females. Mm-hmm. And then I started to see how those females were performing. Yeah. And those half-blood females have been, for the most part, tremendous, and not all of them. And that's there. I think you and I have talked too about the thing that's kind of a struggle is the disposition deal. Sure. And there's some inconsistencies there. Yeah. Excuse me. But the good ones are good ones. Oh, absolutely. I've got cows that, the way we run in some rough country, and if I have a cow last 10 years, that's probably you're reaching your limit. But now I'm really surprised at how many of those, I've got most of those, some 12-year-old cows that are still producing that I thought normally they'd be gone by now. Mm-hmm. But they're pregnant early, they've still got their teeth. Yep. So, so that's worked really well for us.
Oh, if I was to say the best kept secret, we're talking about trade secrets here, I hate to flood our own market, but honestly, the best kept secret in the commercial beef world right now is that F1 Akaushi female. Because same for me coming into the breed, I came in because I wanted the marbling and I didn't want to wreck the cows to do it, right? Like I came in, that's why I came into the breed. Starting right here, which I'll come back around to and tell that story. But, you know, looking at that F1 cow today, you and I just came here from the I guess I call it calving pen. I mean, the calving pasture, the cows that are calving out on pasture, saw a 12-year-old cow with a fresh calf,
brand new baby.
Perfect udder, and she's calving, up front in the season, and like baby looks great, and that's a great mom, and everything's in good shape. Like you mentioned, I mean, as a 12-year-old cow. And if the average cow is washing out at 10, and now even let's say if every single one of those washed out at the end of this year, right, and they all came up open, even if that's all they did, which I don't think that's where they're done, but even if it was, and you say, hey, we're getting an extra 1 or 2 calves off each, that is a huge deal. I mean, that same replacement cost, when you put it into that heifer, it is sunk. Whether she gives you 1 calf, 2 calves, or 12 calves, that it's sunk, you know? And so if you can get an extra couple calves, that is a huge deal. And that cow, that was a reasonably sized cow that isn't going to eat you out of house and home, right? And that was a cow. I mean, she's not falling apart. Her feet aren't falling apart. Her udder's not falling apart. It's not a matter of like, you see that cow that she looks old and tired and worn out. If you hadn't told me that cow was 12, I said maybe 7 or 8. If I was spitballing, I mean, just looking at the cow. And if she ran through the ring at the sale yard and they're calling out that they're all bred, you know, black, calving these black bulls, they'd say that's a 7, 8-year-old cow. You know, good solid mouth cow, you know, prime, because that's what she looks, you know, and that's a 12-year-old cow. And, but yeah, I mean, circling back even to the comment I'd made, and so we'd been talking about the feedlot, you know, you've been feeding cattle out at, and I talked about the comment I made of wanting to have Wagyu beef, but not, frankly, wreck the cows to do it. And it does. I mean, my story, my Akaushi story circles right back to here, you know, and you'd mentioned you got in them in 2012. And then in 2018, I was hired by a local hay farmer that was looking to run some hay through some cows to come source a set of cows for me. He wanted me to pick through a set of heifers. And he said he was going to be sourcing Akaushi heifers. And lo and behold, it was here that I came to. And I had met Bubba Bain the one time, and I guess heard of the cattle, but never really pursued them. And I remember getting here, and I'd had people asking me for Wagyu genetics for years, saying, oh, you know, can I get some Wagyu? Can I get some Wagyu? And I said, look, I'll eat them with you. But like, I am not raising these Coriani Jersey cross things. I am going to have to apologize to all my friends that I love and respect that are willing to run those cows, but I'm not. And, you know, and I looked at it like, hey, yeah, I got all these people calling for Wagyu genetics. You know, they want the Wagyu genetics, but I cannot tolerate the cattle. And so Dave Allen calls up and he says, hey, we're going to run up to Oakley. Would you come for a day with me and just help me sort on these heifers? And I'm going to look at these Akaushi crossbred heifers. And so we get up here to, I guess we'd have been Burley then. If we were over to Ken's place. Is that where we were at, I guess? And I remember rolling into the feedlot, and you were there, you know, waiting to meet Dave and I, and I step out expecting to see, frankly, some Japanese looking cattle, you know, these kind of sorry Coriani Jersey cross looking things, or like you said, I mean, a cross between a buffalo and an antelope. You know? Throw you under the bus there, you know what I'm saying? Come and step out. And I remember asking them, like, so where are your Japanese cattle? You know, no, these are them. And I mean, that's the light bulb moment. Like for me and my experience with Akaushi, that is when it flipped the switch from like, you know, just some breed I'd never heard of, to like, no, if these cattle can grade like we're talking about them grading, you know, those that are going 60% prime, and they look like, it's a pretty darn good set of feeders we're looking at, you know, this is a good set of calves. That was the moment where I said, no, this is, I mean, Dave Allen went home purchasing a set of heifers from you, crossbred heifers from you. I went home and called up Jordan and bought a set of Akaushi embryos, one of which is that 919 cow that has been the cornerstone of our program. So anyway, kind of a fun, it is a fun full circle moment for me to be sitting here at the ranch. Years later, we're looking at mature bulls that are 919 sons, you know, here at your ranch servicing these commercial cows. But it goes back to that moment in the feedlot there saying, hey, these are quality cattle that can put a quality steak on the plate.
Yeah.
So.
And like I say, I think you guys got to be honest with that. That's kind of the big thing I get out of all this. You got to be honest with yourself. Oh, yeah. If it's not working, then do something different or tweak it a little bit. Sure. Yeah, you know, like I say, it's kind of funny. I wish I could say, you know, the standards. Oh, I calve in 45 days, and I only have a 3% death loss, and I'm not bringing any dinks home. That ain't true. I mean, but you know, by and large, and like we talked about, like the cow we were talking about, and this is this shouldn't be a revelation to anybody, but and it's oversimplifying it. But the middle of the road is the best. And we've bounced. I think I'm kind of old, and I remember the '80s, and that's when I was in high school. I graduated in '83, and I remember my show steer. I had a steer that was like 60 inches tall. And you could barely see over him. Yep. He was sim cross, and I thought he was a world beater. And I remember when I took him to the fair, and I ended up, I thought I was going to get grand champion. I really did. Yeah. And everyone was looking at him, and I ended up third. And I remember being so disappointed. Well, he was 60 inches tall, and he weighed 1180. And what a bunch of nonsense that was. And like one of my favorite things to do when I'd go to Denver is in the one sale barn. They have the Wall of Fame, and I haven't been back since they've redone it all. Sure. But I loved walking through that and seeing the pictures of all the champions. Yeah. And those '80s cattle. Like I wanted to go back and remember what in the hell the judges were saying. I want to hear the justification for that.
Well, if you look at all those champions, the 1950s, you can see the exhibitors' belt buckles.
Yes.
And by the 1980s, you
can't
only
see their hats. Yep. So I mean, we could have a whole other podcast on my thoughts about the show industry. Sure. And I'm not totally disparaging. And I've judged a lot of county fairs.
Sure. So
it's interesting. It's interesting. And
it's its own world.
And if I may diverge from my path,
please do.
A little
please
bit,
do.
I think it's even the way things have evolved and changed now. So those show cattle now are bred by a lot of and it's always been this way to a degree, but there's so many this little tiny, which is fine. I mean, anyone who's in the industry, I applaud them, and because we can use all the friends we got. Yeah. But someone's got 5 cows, and they're breeding show cattle. Right. Period. Right. And that is to a degree setting our industry standard, and I think that's really damaging in a lot of ways. Right. And like when I go to judge a show, I might I talk here that I want good functional cattle. Well, I'm judging a class of all club calves, and not that there's some good cattle, and I'll be honest, there's nothing like walking through a show barn. There's nothing like pretty show cattle. I love it, but you need to take a step back and see what are we doing here.
Right. Well, that's if you're breeding show cattle, by definition, plain and simple, and it's in every description of every show bull that's ever sold a unit of semen, you are breeding for bone and you're breeding for hair, both of which land on the kill floor. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not saying, like I said, I've judged shows and I got people I love and appreciate that breed show cattle. But again, just understanding each of these animals for what they are. And I think it's human nature, and especially I'd say it's American nature to pursue the biggest, the baddest, the fastest, you know what I mean? Yeah. To take things to extreme is human and or it's dang sure American. I mean, I can't speak for the rest of the planet, but it is very much human and American. And I think, it's the same thing whether we see in Wagyu saying, hey, we're going to push it all the way to this is way more fat. I mean, it's well beyond 50% marbling now. Way more fat than it is meat, right? And maybe that's the target, maybe it's not. And if people want to chase that, that's fine. And it's the same with show cattle. If we're saying all we want's the bone and the muscle, that's great. That's fine. If that's what they want to do, they will win shows. You know what I mean? And the Wagyu will go and win some carcass contests, right? But it all comes down to, what are you breeding for and or what are you feeding for? And again, it's okay that each program has some individuality to that, because honestly, I think that's where the value is. Like if all you are is the second-rate version of someone else, you know what I mean? Why would they not go pursue it there? Like I think it's okay. And especially it's a neat era that we're in now. You and I, prior to recording this, we were talking about the reach you can have through things like social media or stuff. Where I was talking about, for me, the market reach I have from home in Western Idaho is greater today than what it would be if I spent 50 weeks a year on the road at trade shows 15 years ago, trying to build a network of people that would be interested in what I have to sell. But I think part of the opportunity in today's environment, as far as being able to reach that kind of a client base, you can find people that want what it is you have. Like you don't need to be someone else. You don't need to be just like this carcass breeder. You don't need to be just like that show breeder. Like Marchant Ranch can be Marchant Ranch, and Christensen Genetics can be Christensen Genetics, even though we're both right here in Idaho and there's a lot of commonalities. But it's okay to lean into some of those individual production paradigms and how we breed them and what matters to me or what matters to you, because at the end of the day, it's got to fit your program, not someone else's. Now, there's got to be a way to market it, right? And if that is to have extreme carcass, great. Or if that's to have extreme show results, great. For you, it's to put a quality fat animal, cost effectively put a quality fat animal on the bus that your buyer wants, right? And that's target free because that pays the bills for you, right? And I think that's what people have got to be willing and able to lean into is I need to breed and feed these animals. I mean, number one, for me and for what my production environment is, but two, so that there's someone willing and able to buy them, right? You know, and anyway, I don't know if you have any comments on that. Sorry, I'm getting way off on a tangent.
So the thoughts I had while you were saying that, if I can remember what I was thinking, was kind of so my finding Akaushi has kind of been freeing to me because now I don't. So like I said, we've been breeding limousine cattle for a long time, but to market those cattle because they do some things that I want, but you couldn't stray too far from the English and the Angus, or it's almost embarrassing when embarrassing is not the right word, but they're telling when no, they're not Angus.
You'd hate to be different. What I mean?
Right.
People claim they're different from cows, but they're sure not comfortable leaving the herd.
Right. So you can't stray. So like marketing those cattle, you can't stray too far from that. Right. That and call it middle of the road or call it whatever you want. Sure. But Akaushi's has allowed me to not almost throw this is oversimplified. Not worry so much about the phenotype as in color or hide color. And you look at my cows now. I used to have they're all black. Mm-hmm. Now they're kind of rainbow, and it does not matter when I feed them. But if I have to run them to the sale yard, and I've got some reds and there's some broccoli face there and some white face and there's some Charolais blood in there, but I really am selling what's on the platter.
Right.
So it's been so fun to be able to do that and not care what they look like. And that's not really true. I don't care phenotypically.
I see exactly what you're saying, though. Right. Well, and it is. It's you've identified where you're selling and what matters to them.
Yeah.
And they're not asking you about color. Or, they're not even necessarily asking about build. Now they need them a certain weight and they need them to grade a certain way. Right. I mean, you got to meet your obligations of what it is you're shipping.
Right.
But they don't need some of those things.
And there's I would like my cow herd to be a little more uniform than they are. I mean, we looked at those cows and there's some kind of different types and it's kind of funny. If someone would ask me so what's the perfect phenotype for your cow, and I'm not really sure. I mean, I got I bred some red Angus cows and some AI'd some, and I've got they were smaller framed but they've been really good cows, But like the cow you were talking about she's a completely different phenotype,
Sure.
But I'm breeding those to Akaushi, and I'm not saying that I breed Akaushi and everything's perfect, because those calves are going to be different. But the way I'm marketing them, it doesn't matter quite so much the frame size and and of course I have to keep under certain parameters. I mean, obviously the great big cows don't work for me. I don't get them bred back, and just stands to reason. But I don't have to worry so much about that as I would if I'm selling through other avenues.
Oh yeah. Well, and I see people get on the internet. Man, people get brave on the internet. I watch people just chew each other apart on social media, right, or on Facebook, and are like big cows versus small cows, right? And you'll get some corn farmer in Iowa that is just convinced. I mean, there are some there's some individuals on both sides of any argument, right? But that'll just swear up and down, like only big cattle could ever be good. I'm like, that's fine for what you're doing. I'm sure you are spot on, right? But then you get somebody out here, that's running on the mountain, right? Or the cattle have to travel, or they're dealing with some sparse feed, or completely different production environment. And it said, no, there's no way a big cow could work, right? And either one of the two can absolutely be right for that environment or for that ranch, And I think it's okay that there's a different solution for each of the two, right? Rather than people are trying to argue and say, well, it can only be big cows or it can only be small cows. And that's one of the things, like even within what we're doing breeding wise, we do breed some different cattle. For me personally at home, we breed some different genetics for some different fits, right? Some bigger cattle that are going to go out into the corn belt, right? And they're going to go hang a big, heavy carcass kind of a deal. And or some smaller ones that, if a guy says I'm dumping out on the range in Nevada, you know what I mean? And we're going to run a cow per 240 acres, you know what I mean? Because there's nothing but dirt, rocks, and sagebrush out there. It takes a different cow than what you're going to go run on straight corn. And so that's what I look at. It's okay that there's some differences, but I think it's so important that people lean into what is it that's going to fit, right? Because within our programming, even just breaking it out into some different pieces, like we have a full blood component, which are all going to be 100% Japanese origin and they're horned, right? Yeah. And we have a purebred component, which are going to be 15/16 or better Akaushi, and they're polled. Or at this point, we are starting to develop some that are they're just F1s at this point, but they are black, right? And each one of those three fits a different customer. If somebody says, I am going to touch the sale ring, and that's where they're going to market, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, they're going through the sale ring, well, enter the black component of our program, absolutely. Right? Or if somebody says, I absolutely never have handled horns, or I refuse to, or I don't want to, plain and simple, or for whatever reason, I'm not going to monkey with horns, we're going polled. And or if somebody says, well, it's 100% or 100%, that's fine and well, we're going to go full blood. But I think knowing where you're going to go with the cattle, I think it's important for people to understand and establish, honestly, more or less about where you're going to sell the cattle before you ever really even start buying them or feeding them. Like, where are you going to sell these things? Like, is it as a live fat to Heartbrand? Is it on the plate or in the freezer to friends and family? Yeah. Is it just personal consumption? Is it, you know what I mean? Is it breeding stock? What is the end target, and how are we going to get there? You know? So looking at, I guess, your feeding experience and or selling those cattle, I mean, what would you say as you look at feeding cattle out and selling them as live fats? What are maybe some keys to your success there, as far as that being your marketing avenue, and or some pitfalls that you would tell people, like, hey, this was a real issue or a real problem when it comes to feeding cattle or feedlotting cattle, that you would avoid as far as that process, like selling them at some stage that's not weaning, right? You're selling them as fats, and there's a long ways between weaning and a fat. I mean, in this case, how many months are they generally there? They're in November, and then they're out.
So I'm going like the end of December, January. Well, in the last February was so I'm over a year in the feedlot.
In the lot. Yes.
So there's so my number one thing, at least to me, that jumps out at me without getting into all the logistics of how you market them, whether you're on the grid or that kind of deal, is that the longer you have them, the more apt you are to lose one.
Sure.
And it really hurts to
absolutely. Absolutely.
I lost one. Well, we were loading.
Oh, but we have 0% death loss, right? You forget. Neither one of us has ever made a mistake. We're not dealing with living things. We're dealing with machines.
So for someone else, the pitfalls would be
a friend that lost an animal.
Because we lose some. I mean, every year.
It's part of life.
When one dies, I think, damn, if I could have sold that thing for, $1,800. Yes. And here and it's a big loss, and every year, I mean, and I'm not feeding a lot of cattle, I'm not great big, but almost every year I'm losing one pretty late into the feeding period.
Right. After it's racked up a good chunk of that feed bill.
Yeah, right. Yes. I still got to pay for the feed.
That's exactly
and that to me is the number one thing you got to be, that scares you, and like I say, that the first year I sold fat cattle was kind of by accident, because if you
so previously, were you selling weanlings, yearlings? You're seven weights,
like a yearling. So I think if you're going to do that, you need to have your ducks in a row and have your market, because if you're getting those cattle too fat in the spring, and then you're kind of in a bad spot. If you're getting haven't got your marketing plans done and all of a sudden they're 9 weights. Mm-hmm. That's a bad spot to be in.
Sure. So, I mean, for you, are you locking up these cattle? I mean, when they're going in as 5, 6, or 7 weights, you've got a plan for when they're out and to who? Or, I mean, when are you locking up, this is when and where these cattle are delivering?
So, when I'm putting them in the feedlot, I know that I'm going to market them in December, January, February.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's basically a year-long feeding period with some extra time for the ones that are younger or smaller or lighter for whatever reason.
And Jordan knows that, and so you can have a couple loads in January, and so and we've got it structured now. So the first year we kind of got in a little trouble because we went into January, and so you got your tax deal going on.
All right,
so it wasn't that big.
Another podcast right there.
It wasn't that big a deal, but that's something.
I know what you mean.
So now we're marketing. Last year's calves this year.
Yes.
And so
now you're marketing 2 crops in 1 year,
and the
IRS wants a piece. Yeah.
So now you're thinking. Things look really good. Maybe I should sell these calves this year. So now I'm selling 2 crops of calves this year. So and so I'll go through. Matter of fact, we've got most of our calves, and we've sold something because not everything is Akaushi. When I go on the mountain, that first start. The reason I first started doing that was because I was kind of scared to turn out. I remember paying $6,000 for a bull.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And those Akaushi bulls, and thinking, there's no way I'm sending those buggers up on the
It
mountain.
feels way expensive. I remember, yeah, $6,000 bull felt wildly expensive not that long ago.
Right, not that long ago.
Right.
And so what I do, well, number one, I didn't, I wasn't trying to, I'm not wanting to be in the Akaushi purebred Akaushi business, and I don't need a bunch of full bloods, and so I was turning my other bulls out on the mountain then, and and I still. I got some black Lemmy bulls, and I got a Charlotte bull that I got from you. So I've kind of got some wild ideas about what my breeding program is and why. So anyway, what I was getting to is, so I still have most of my calves are in the feedlot now, but we sold some as weaners.
Right.
So
The ones that didn't DNA test as Akaushi or that you knew weren't Akaushi, you're going to market them at weaning just through a local sale barn, I guess.
Yep. Or most of them, and we probably sell, I don't know, depending on the year, 10 to 15 to local stuff.
You've got Burley, Twin, and Jerome. Do you go to one of those yards, or do you go to a local trading station or something, or just friends, or direct via? How do you market those?
All of them.
All of them, yeah.
But mostly we'll just, I'll just send a load to sale yard. Sure. That's kind of, and that's easy, maybe not. But I've sold to local feed yards and stuff like that. Sure. And like I've got some calves in, so I've got about a dozen head of Charolais cross steers in there that I need to get rid of.
Sure.
We can feed them, and so, but
your model isn't necessarily set to take non-Akaushi through to finish. So it's saying, hey, if it's not Akaushi, we're going to sell them as weaners, and if it does DNA Akaushi, or we know it's going to be Akaushi, we're going to take those through and market them as fats.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So we'll have 50 head or so.
Yeah.
That's not.
Sure. Yep.
And then for different reasons we do that, because I'm trying to, what would be the perfect cow, and I'm trying to, if I breed, this sounds crazy, but if I breed a Charolais to a half Akaushi cow, and get that calf, is that going to make a good female?
Sure.
And I don't know yet.
Sure.
We're just getting into some of those things. We'll see how they turn out. But
right. Yep. Well, and it's an interesting application. I mean, back to what we were talking about with that F1 cow that we saw that had just dropped a calf, the 12-year-old coming, which I thought just fun that happened to be.
Yeah,
what I mean? On this day, we happened to be there. We happened to be in the right spot at the right time. I mean, calf's still wet and is just tickled, swinging its tail that it's just gotten its first taste of milk. Like, but fun that happened to be today's baby that was fresh, right? With that 12-year-old F1 cow. But I mean, I do think there's a lot of maternal application of these cattle that gets overlooked. I mean, what brings people to Akaushi is the carcass, right? And or the carcass and the fact that these are some decent looking cattle, right? But the fact that you can make a pretty darn good cow with some Akaushi blood in her.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's overlooked, and it'll probably take a long time before that really takes off commercially. I mean, it's going to be slow adoption, but I mean, man, it sure works.
Yeah.
I've been impressed by it.
And that's again, I kind of stumbled into that.
Sure.
And obviously as time goes on, I'm saying, I've still got those cows.
Right.
And they're in good shape, and I can run her another year.
Right. Well, and this is the thing that's interesting. We had touched on it a little earlier. What makes a good one? You know what I mean? Like, is it just that she's really pretty, or is it that she's really big, or is it that she's really small, or is it that, you know what I mean, or is it or is it what her pedigree says, or is it what her EPDs say, or is it all these pieces? But honestly, when I get looking at it, this is part of what gets me so excited about Akaushi. What I think is great about the cattle, it's not just all of what they should be. Like the pedigree will tell you what they should be, right? Or the EPDs will tell you what they should be. Or even looking at the cattle in the pen and evaluating them, like with the Bondsma principles or things like, really getting in depth. And all of which I love and appreciate all of these different ways of analyzing cattle, but again, it's what they should be, right? Whereas when we're looking at a 12-year-old cow nursing a brand new calf early in the calving season, that is what is, right? And what is pays bills, not what should be, right? And I'm the exact same as you. I'm always testing, like, let's cross them this way, or let's cross them that way. Let's try, and that is what makes it fun, right? Like, I enjoy that. Like that gets the gears turning for me. But what excites me about Akaushi is what is, and what is old cows still weaning calves, right? And what is loads going 60% prime, right? And what is fat selling for enough to cover that big whopping feed bill, right? I mean, and those pieces for me are exciting about the Akaushi cattle. So, I mean, if you were looking at your herd today, right? We've just gone and looked at the bulls, and really fun to go through those. Really enjoyed. We saw some full brothers to the Davy Crockett stud. Loved those bulls. Fun to see those and fun to compare and contrast some of the different bulls you've gotten from. Because I mean, you've bought 15-ish. Most of them as pregnancies from us, and then fun to see those calved out and raised side by side and what they turned into. But we delivered 2 more bulls today, right? You got some screaming deals, made some awesome buys in our last auction on bulls.
I feel a little guilty, but not really. Not really.
If someone had to get a great buy, it'd just as well be my friend Paul. You know,
There you
so
go.
tickled to deliver them here. It's good it got me here to record this podcast,
Yeah.
you know, because it's sure been fun to talk them. But I mean, we're delivering bulls again, right? I mean, you got more Akaushi bulls coming in. You've been breeding Akaushi bulls clear back to 2012. So I mean, 14 years ago. What keeps you coming back to an Akaushi bull for Marchant Ranch for the bull you're going to turn out?
Well, so interesting you said it because it's kind of funny. I'm kind of a slow learner, you know. You think, and now it's like, even though I've been doing this for a long time, it's only like I would even say the last year that I've like, these are damn good females.
They are. They are.
And because I've been thinking, well, I've been trying to. What can I do to get females, you know, and how am I can I have a breeding pasture and put black bulls or whatever over here, and you know, I'm not really equipped to do that, and so it's kind of a slow process. But now I've come to the realization, like I'm running more Akaushi bulls now because I'm glad to have those females.
Absolutely. They're not the throwaway or needs to go to the feeder pen like you might have, or at least like I might have thought anyway.
Right, and you know, and again, I'm not trying, and I'll be honest, you know, the higher percentage Akaushi, I mean, you're losing some performance.
Sure.
There's no
Smaller
question
animal,
about
slower
that.
gaining animal. Sure.
You know,
Yes.
but
Yep.
so I'm not, you know, everything's Akaushi. I'm not doing that. I've got some of them. I'm still with some of my old kind of cows.
Sure.
But the Akaushi is more and more prominent in what we're doing. And you know, we talked about the longevity. So that's another thing. And you and I talked about earlier is how surprised I have been for the most part how viable those bulls are to an older age.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I mean, they can travel the country and you know, they're not going to kill the cow when they breed her. It's you know, so I'm breeding those. I'm keeping those bulls. Except, you know, I've got to get rid of them because I don't want them breeding their daughters.
Sure,
kind of thing,
sure. Yep. So some limitations there. But you know, I mean, I look at it like, I mean, within your program here, it's adding premiums for you when you go to sell fats, right? So there's a win there. You're getting more years of service off a bull, so there's a win there. Yeah. You're getting more years of service off a cow, so there's a win there. And then looking at that cow, I mean, again, just going off the basic math of, I mean, live weight of a cow and eating X percentage of her body weight in daily feed. A cow that's the size of that F1 Akaushi we saw is not going to eat as much as some of the 1-ton Tinas you'll see out roaming, you know, some other pastures, right, of other breeds, right? And so I think there's that things like that, the premium coming on the fats, saving money on the bulls, saving money on the cows, all of those are dollars in your pocket, right? And that can keep a ranch viable. But I mean, is there anything else that you would touch on that you say, like, this is why you continue to invest in Akaushi bulls, or that keeps you coming back to them?
Okay, and this sounds kind of hokey. It really does. but the people.
Sure.
I mean,
Absolutely.
You know, I've you know, Bubba Bain is a dear friend of mine, you know, and you, Seth.
Sure.
I mean, that's why I keep buying bulls from you.
Appreciate that.
Because I feel kind of beholden to you. I honestly do. You know, I should. So you know I'm a sucker. Right?
No.
But you know, but I've been treated fairly.
Sure.
You know, and when I sell those cattle, you know, I've never been. Like when I call Jordan up or he calls me, I'm completely confident that I'm being treated fairly, and I don't even need to worry about it.
Right. Yep.
So that's a big thing. And I know that sounds kind of hokey.
No, it's accurate. Well, I remember here. I mean, again, we're gonna go off on the dirt road, you know, on the GPS here, right? But tangent that brings up, you talk about people and the importance of people and the people behind the cattle. But I remember being in Angus and early on in my Angus career, I remember being frustrated as a young breeder that I could breed cattle that were genetically very, very similar to some really, really high selling, high value, high octane kind of cattle. The only difference was the prefix, i.e. like where those cattle were coming from, right?
Yep.
Or the name or the people behind them. And I remember that being frustrating to me, like, well, the genetics are this, and you'll see the same thing in Akaushi today, you know, as far as some people entering the breed or things like that. Or even for me, not every one of my animals sells it at a wildly high figure, right? You know, but looking at, you know, you have people enter the breed and say, well, it's genetically similar to this super high seller. It ought to be bringing the same money. The only difference is the prefix. But the prefix represents the people. And the people at the end of the day are the ones that are either going to take care of you or they're not. And honestly, the prefix in many cases, when it comes to buying genetics, period, or especially like buying bulls, the prefix matters as much or more than, you know, how is this animal bred or what is it or what exactly is the pedigree or the EPDs or whatever. it's the same. If you reach out to me for bulls, you're not going to wring my neck on like, well, what about, this bloodline or that, whatever. You trust me because I've been able to bring and deliver animals that have gotten it done and taken care of you and treated you fairly. I'm going to send you a good set of bulls. Just like, when you sell your cattle, you're going to be treated fairly. And I think it's an undervalued component, I guess, of genetics, and we're like the seed stock marketplace at large, right? And that's one thing I would say for a lot of people that are looking at being new seed stock breeders or trying to sell bulls or whatever else. It's not all about just the bull or just the cow or just how they're bred. It has everything to do with how you treat people, because how you treat people doesn't just impact that person or that friend or that client. It'll impact the 200 people or 20 people or whatever that they'll tell, whether it was great or whether it was terrible. And you'd better bet if you bite somebody or you don't take care of people or you don't treat them right, it is human nature. That bad news will spread and spread quickly. You know what I mean? And that's, so I think you hit on a great, it's an important piece for people to understand, especially if they're considering getting into the seed stock. And I'd say any marketplace, but especially the world I operate in, you've got to take care of folks, because if you don't, they're not coming back. Anyway, that's a takeaway I would say.
Like when you first started to talk about that, when you were just starting out, and why is my genetics are the same as X, and you could take it negatively, like, oh, that's unfair, because, but I like the way you brought it around, and it's a great point. That prefix means something because they've treated people right and they've produced quality year after year after year. So.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, and it does. I mean, all of us, I think if you've been in cattle long enough, there'll be prefixes that you'll recognize that there is a positive association with, and there'll be prefixes you recognize that, frankly, there's a negative association with. And as a seed stock producer or any operator, you have control over that, and it comes down to how you treat people. You know what I mean? And you don't have perfect control. I mean, like I'm sure that there's feathers I've ruffled too. You know what I mean? You wouldn't have to look that far to find someone I've offended. But I mean, so no. I forget. We're talking 0% fail rate on ever offending anyone. That's right. Yeah, that's a realistic standard. But I mean, I do my best to make sure that if I take care of people when we do any transaction, they will be back to do it again, because they know they'll be treated fairly, right? Or they'll be taken care of. So, I mean, as you're looking, is there anything else I guess you'd touch base on before we move on from that particular subject of what keeps you using Akaushi bulls? Because I keep getting excited and throwing out chunks or whatever. Is there anything else you'd throw in there as far as what keeps you as a commercial producer buying Akaushi bulls?
Well, I just think it's fun. It's been a consistently good experience for me. Right. And so until I'm going to ride the horse as long as it's going to carry me. And I'm not saying I'm going to extremes and trying to catch the high end of everything, but I think we've really, more than anything, I've been in the cow business my whole life, and this has probably been the most consistently good thing I've ever been involved in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, I mean, if you're looking at the broader commercial marketplace, right? So you and I were talking, you got an awesome buy on these bulls, and we were talking about, okay, why would that be that, some of these bulls traded cheaper, right? I mean, in an auction setting, right? And I mean, like the auction set the price, and great bulls at a great figure, which I'm tickled to bring to you, but you and I were discussing, earlier on, why would it be that these traded at the figure they did? Why would it be that the bull market is softer? Because in this case, it's not a lack of genetic quality, right? Or it's not a lack of, like, you and I have a great working relationship, and we brought plenty of bulls here before. So, like, the quality of the bulls is there. The quality of the prefix, to call it that, is there. The auction at large did great, especially on the females, semen, embryos, but the bulls are soft. And we were talking about, I guess, the lack of total. Well, I guess, walk us through that. Walk us through your take on maybe we were talking about it. What do you think?
So as I told you, while we were talking about it, I was, I'm watching an online sale, and I'm like, I wasn't really in the market for some bulls. I mean, sure. So I bid, and I bid it again, but it didn't take off. Right. Like I'm thinking, because I was telling you earlier, I bought a limousine bull earlier this year, a good bull. Oh, sure. And then
They cost you a lot more than what
it cost me a lot more, and I'm thinking that's kind of backwards,
right? Exactly.
Because there's not as Akaushi is more rare. There's not as many of them, and look what they do. And because I first, like I told you, I paid $6,000 for those first bulls, and they about killed me. And now I'm expecting I'm having to pay. If I'm paying $9,500 for a Limmy or an Angus bull, I'm thinking that's going to translate to 12 for an Akaushi, and it didn't because I think because again it's like part of me doesn't want to tell anybody about Akaushi because I want to keep the secret for myself.
It's been
because
a good thing.
if honestly, if people knew what these cattle did, it would take off on the commodity level.
Oh, absolutely.
More than it has.
Right.
And right now, and you can probably attest to it because it's what you're doing. Yeah. The breeder market is getting filled now. And so you're selling genetics to smaller producers, which is great. I'm not saying, but I'm doing. I'm not that I'm huge, but I'm selling I'm still in the commodity market kind of. And that has not really taken off yet.
Right. No,
I think
I agree with you completely. Well, because that's when we were talking about it. You're looking at these females, embryos, semen, etc. The demand for those is strong because the bidders are other breeders, like other small breeders, right? They're looking at building their own little herd of females, right? And they want to make them as good as they possibly can. So there's really strong demand, for those females, embryos, semen, things that are usable, right? And on the seed stock side, but on the seed stock side, you just don't need a whole lot of bulls, right? There's not 300 cows sitting at home that are commercial cows that need bred. You know what I mean? It's a setting where you're saying, well, I've already got semen to AI with and embryos to implant, and maybe I already have one good cover bull, and that's about what they need for a small set of nice cows. And so when we look at the bull market, that side of things, it ends up being it's just a lack of demand scenario in the setting that there's not fleets and fleets of guys that have hundreds or thousands of commercial cows that need serviced that are competing for an Akaushi bull, especially in today's marketplace. I mean, this is the funny thing about all of it. I mean, we're at all-time historic highs in the cattle market. Like, it has never, on the commodity side of things, it has never been higher. I mean, we're setting wild over-the-top records all the time, all over the place. I mean, any given day on Facebook, you can see a new sale barn report of what
happened in Bassett, Nebraska.
Exactly. And like another fleet of sale barn records just got crushed. And I mean, looking at all of it, there is so much demand for cattle right now. Cattle are worth so much money. And so frankly, on the commercial side of things, in a lot of cases, people are like, well, why would I chase a premium when the average Angus bull or whatever? I mean, if I had an extra 100 Angus bulls, I could trade all them for 10 grand, no problem. But it's because it's easy and it's a large liquid marketplace, right? Whereas looking at the Akaushi, now when the market's down and it's in the toilet and guys are struggling to make ends meet, they're looking for any premium they can find, and Akaushi might cross their mind or people might come over to it. But like you said, I mean, if people understood what these cattle are, right? Like what the bulls themselves can do, what the crossbred calves can do, what the feeders can do, what these cows that we were just talking about can do in a commercial setting, right? Or in a crossbred setting, there'd be drastically more demand for them, which may or may not be positive, right? For our businesses here, we're talking about having too much of a good thing or kind of like the goalposts move. You know what I mean? Angus used to be this mega premium thing. Now it's the baseline. Everyone expects at least Angus level quality. And then you got to be one up in that, right? And so as soon as everybody has Akaushi, well, is there a premium left once the whole market is chock full of it? But what do you think? I mean, I guess would be what's it going to take for more commercial guys to latch on to Akaushi or to start buying Akaushi, or if you were looking at say a small Akaushi breeder's listening to this podcast, right, or a younger beginning seed stock producer, how are they ever going to establish a relationship to start marketing any bulls, even if it's a few bulls? You know what I mean? How does it start to see broader commercial acceptance?
Well, I think so. As I ponder that, like, so I've got some of these late calves. I've got the bred them out and whatever. So if I can bring this all around,
sure.
I've got some of those are Akaushi calves, and a lot of them are red, and they don't. I'm like, crap. I don't want to send them to the sale.
Right, they're not black. They don't fit.
Yeah. And but they should be worth more, Right. And so I think you've got to know where you kind of have to have your market established before you jump into it and know that you've got somewhere to go with those cattle. Right. Because if I'm just running these, and we say it generically, I'm just running to the sale yard, which is, I'm not disparaging that method, but because I'm paying. It's kind of ironic that I'm paying less for the Akaushi bulls now than I am the other bulls. But if I'm paying, back when I was paying $6,000, when I'd been paying $2,500 for bulls, and I've got to find, if I wasn't getting a premium for those calves and know that I've got that premium, it just is silly to do.
Right.
So, and I think we're a commodity driven market still, and pounds is what we're selling.
Yep.
And, we've talked about my higher percentage Akaushi cattle aren't typically performing like the others, So, if I'm just, as a matter of fact, I've got a neighbor here that I runs on the mountain with me. They lease some cows and they lease some Akaushi bulls to run them the first year. And, we talked about, I maybe help you market them, and if I would have liked to have been able to maybe buy them from them, but they didn't DNA verify them. They didn't, they just sold them, and so there was really no advantage to them to breed Akaushi,
Right.
The guy who bought them didn't care that they marbled. I mean,
right. No,
to a certain degree.
I know what you mean, though. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, you've got to have a market for that value.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think that's a really, really, really solid point, and it holds true on both sides of the equation. So it doesn't matter whether you are, the commercial buyer of a bull, you've got to have a market for it before it makes a lot of sense to inject those genetics, just like you're saying now. And it's the same for the seed stock producer. Before they go to producing a pile of seed stock and then hoping they have a market, you about need to establish the market first. Like, where am I going with these things? Like, who exactly is going to buy them? Because if I was going to say like one big hole for most anybody breeding Akaushi, whether it is full bloods, purebreds, or even just the commercial application, it is how are we going to market these things? Because like you said, if there's not a marketing plan in place to capitalize on what the Akaushi genetics are bringing to the table, then why would you add the Akaushi genetics? And there's got to be that piece present.
It goes to a couple of touch points that we talked about earlier. Number one, like I talked about, I was not the best salesman in the world. So you've got to be able to sell.
Right.
And so you got to have that if you're going to get in the business. It's more than just having the quality cattle or
you
whatever
can have
product
the best
that is.
Animal in the world. And if no one knows, no one cares. And you're not getting paid.
So there's that point. You've got to be able to sell, but you've got to be a decent person and
and take care of
the people.
Yes, absolutely.
So people got to trust you and know that you're going to deliver. And I think you might have to be willing to go through a couple rough patches, if you're going to do it. Just because I am completely sold on these Akaushi cattle. Sure. And why wouldn't anyone buy them? But everybody doesn't know that. So I'm not just going to go buy them from Joe Smith in Iowa City that I don't know.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And I think, like you mentioned, when we look at kind of building out, like how are you going to market these things? There's got to be just some kind of a plan. Because I think quite often there's this misconception of, as a new breeder, just because I have the genetics, they're going to be worth a pile.
Right.
But if there's no marketing plan, they're not worth a pile. And by the same token, if you just sold them to any given whoever that runs cows that you could convince to buy the bull and said, well, there's going to be more value here, but how, right? What I mean? Like there's got to be an established method or program. And I think too, you look at it like, you mentioned Heartbrand and their program, and they've done a wonderful job there. But it's not Heartbrand's job to provide a market for everybody else. You know what I mean? Like Heartbrand needs to provide a market for their own product, right? For their own beef or for their own bulls. It's not Heartbrand's job to provide a market for absolutely everybody, right? And so I think it would be flawed thinking for somebody to get in and say like, well, I just depend entirely on what they're doing, right? You know what I mean? And or feeding off that larger market. Like I think it's important for each of us to be establishing a commercial endpoint for our clients and establishing, a bull endpoint for our own genetics and or for just establishing an endpoint. Where do these cattle go?
And that point, so brings up a thought. Because it might seem like I'm on this program, so I trust it. I don't need to worry about it. But it's not. I've always had the thought in the back of my mind, well, if this goes south, am I going to have a market for my cattle? Sure. Well, and so now I've got years of data that says this is what these cattle do. Yes. So and that's always been in my mind. If what I'm doing right now doesn't work, am I going to end up in a lurch if it falls away? And so I've always thought, okay, but look, I can say, my feedlot down the road, I guarantee you'll make money on these cattle.
Right.
And this is what they've done for the last 12 years.
Right. Yep. And I think people have got to be willing to, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of cut their teeth as far as like take your time building out and proving a program, just like you're talking about with that feedlot. Like you've got the data that says this is what these cattle do, right? I mean, this is how they grade, this is how they gain, this is what they are. And I think, sometimes for new breeders, especially if someone gets brand new into cattle and wants to be in Akaushi seed stock and then wants to sell them to commercial cattlemen that have been running hundreds or thousands of cows for multiple generations in a lot of cases, it's fairly presumptuous to assume that's like, just because I have this cool cow that you ought to be paying me a pile of money for this bull, you know what I mean? Or that you ought to just trust me because I heard, secondhand or thirdhand from whoever, like that these cattle are great or these cattle are whatever, or that you're like uneducated if you don't want to plug them into, into your system. I think you got to prove like, hey, take the cattle and hey, let's nut a bunch of these bulls and let's raise them out and let's get steers. Let's, even if it is in a small setting, right? Raise a small bunch of them. Let's prove out what these cattle actually can do, right? At your place, under your management, you know what I mean? With your genetics, with your name and reputation on them and everything else, prove what they can do. And then maybe you could go talk to the neighbor down there, and you probably still need to be talking to the neighbor. If you're going to sell carcass quality, you probably need to be selling bulls to the neighbor that takes those cattle all the way through to the finish line, right? Whereas if you're only going to be selling, and if the neighbor always ships all their calves at weaning or all their calves at yearling, you need to make sure you're providing value that's going to result in dollars in the bank, whatever that may be. Maybe you're leaning into, okay, this is the higher end of performance for Akaushi, so they're going to do some positive things as far as Akaushi are concerned within Akaushi for your weaning weights, right? Or this is what this Akaushi cow can do, right? If you can help people understand that. But again, you're going to have to prove it out on your place. And I think it's important for people to get those cattle and say, on our place, here's the carcass. On our place, here's the cow. On our place, here's the rate of gain. Here's the whatever. I think it is a flawed model for people to assume this is a get rich quick scheme. Like the gestation period alone or the generation interval alone is too long for cattle to be a get rich quick scheme. Like this is a long-term play.
Yeah, and this has caused me to be a better planner. Or hopefully, I know that I should be. Look down the road further because forever when I've bought bulls at a sale, the carcass thing I haven't even looked at because I don't care because I'm just going to sell it to the sale or a buyer. But I would look further down the road to that person, that man or woman who wants to get into the Akaushi business. Sure. If he can tell people, a commercial producer, maybe develop a relationship with a feeder who's going to make his money off those cattle. And that takes some doing. You can't just sell them to them. You've got to do some communication and prove it too. So.
Yep. Well, and I think that's, as I look back at, like, I guess our conversation at large here, as far as, like all of what's come to pass here on your operation and how Akaushi's worked and all of what's come to pass on my operation and how Akaushi's worked. And then looking forward at how do we see some broader, I guess, acceptance or adoption of Akaushi genetics. I do think people have to, one, plug them in themselves and prove out themselves, put the money into the cattle, put the money and the time, and mostly the patience is the hardest part to come by. The patience to take them through to the finish line, right? See what they can do. Prove out and understand this is what these animals, not just what they should be, not what the pedigree said, not what the EPD said, like what the cattle are for birth weight, for rate of gain, for carcass on the plate, for all those pieces. And then you might be able to start to approach someone who's been doing this for a living or been doing this for decades, or their father's been doing it ahead of them, whose father's doing it ahead of it, so on and so forth. Then you might be able to come in and tell somebody, here is where exactly my genetics that I have developed on my place under my management are going to add value to you with your production scheme, your management scheme, your marketing scheme, and then take care of that person to where long-term they're going to be willing to come back and buy bulls, whether it's, on great years, terrible years, expensive years, low years, whatever it may be. That they'll stick with you through that because you have proven you can add value to your system and to theirs. So anyway, any other thoughts, Paul, that you would add? I definitely enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed being here, appreciate you and purchasing those bulls, you know what I mean, and supporting our program and continuing to do business with me for all these years. And I guess mostly appreciate you taking the jump in 2012. So I had somewhere to come see, you know what I mean? And
I was
grab
thinking
a
about
hold
you,
of these
Seth.
cattle in 2018. I say, I sure appreciate you jumping first so I could jump after, you know. But anything else, I guess you would throw in as far as what you see for the future of this ranch, the Akaushi breed, or anyone listening that might be considering engaging in either seed stock or commercial application of these cattle?
I think, and actually this conversation has kind of gelled my thinking too. I think a couple things. I think you need to be patient, but you need to plan, you know, and like I said,
Plan to go nowhere, like you'll get there every time.
and we got kind of lucky. And like I told you, we kind of fell bass backwards into it to a certain degree.
So did I.
So I don't want to say that we were completely stupid, but we did. And we had to learn along the way that it's taken some planning and some communication, and it's harder work. You know, you got to DNA verify stuff, and it's not that easy. Sure. You know, and going back to, you know, we talked about clear back when we first started this conversation, the business model of Progressive Publishing. Yeah. And I've learned a lot from them in that they could have grown faster. Sure. And early on when we were building up the readership of that magazine, I was thinking, come on, because I was selling ads too, right. And like, why are we concentrating on like the herds of 200 or bigger? Mm-hmm. You know, because that's because advertisers want to go to those people, and you know, we could build our readership faster. But now I look back, it's made so much more sense to do it with a lot more wisdom. Take your time, go to the right people, or, you know, the right market, mm-hmm. you know, whatever, and it's not going to happen on its own. That's and that's the last lesson. I mean, nothing is going to happen on its own. I mean, you get lucky occasionally, but without, you know, hard work and planning, dedication, and that I wish there was a magic bullet. And so Akaushi are not a magic bullet. Sure. You know, right. They're great for me, and I think they can work in a variety of situations. I mean, you know, we've talked about, you know, maybe some disposition problems and some consistency in that. Yep. I think it needs to be improved a little bit. Absolutely. You know, there's great ones and there's some that are not so great, and within the same cow family. Right. You know, absolutely. So there is no magic bullet. There is not, but the magic bullet is hard work and using your head the right way. Right, so. Right. Yep. No, and I'd agree with that. And I think it's been fun. I appreciate you taking the time to take me through these cattle, because it's fun because you started in 2012, right? You've got that 12-year-old cow out there. Yeah. Like the proof's in the pudding, but it took 12 years to know that here on this ranch, under your management with your production scenario, that cow is here at 12 with that fresh wet calf in March. You know, like it's not quick. We couldn't, you know? It took over a decade to figure that out. Yeah. Right. And so that's where I think, you know, if people can come in and like you said, have a plan and have patience. And so I would say, you know, I mean, people have got to know, where is it they want to go? What is it they want to do? Yeah. You know what I mean? What is the target? You know what I mean? Is it wild carcass, right? Or is it show level cattle, or is it great calves for sale at weaning, you know, heavy growth curves, things like that? Or is it, you know, what is the target? Establish the target, figure out how are we going to get there first for our program, you know what I mean? And so honestly, I would say for folks, I mean, to be nutting about all their bulls and prove that out in your program, then you might look at saying like, okay, we can take the top few and take them over to a neighbor who's been running hundreds or thousands of cows for however long that may be, and say, okay, here's what we found and what we learned and where it added value, or here's what we're breeding for on this ranch under our management, and here's how it would add value to you. And if they say, well, where would I sell them? You know what I mean? There's got to be a plan for that, right? And there's got to be a target. There's got to be an endpoint. And I think if a guy will take it on like you're talking about with that patience and say, hey, I'm going to come in, and this is going to be the long haul kind of a thing. It is going to take time for me to figure out my thing and my genetics and my management, and it's going to take time for me to figure out my marketing. But if you'll stay the course, that's what separates a breeder from a multiplier, right? I mean, if you're going to be a breeder, you've got to have been in it and stayed the course for a period of time. You know, it doesn't happen overnight that people say, well, because you have a cool cow, you're a breeder. The generation interval alone says it's going to take you years before people are going to look and say, oh, well, they did this, and this, and that adds value somewhere. Yeah, I was thinking as we were talking 30-something years ago, I had a friend that got in the ostrich business. Oh, yeah. and he was going to take the world by storm. Yeah. And so he hit kind of the tail end of that breeder market. So he's buying these ostriches, but ostriches right now are where the turkey business was in the 30s. We are just going to take over the world. Right. Well, he was in the ostrich business for maybe 2 years. I don't know. So, and because he didn't do all of those things, right. Stayed it out, figured out where I'm going with it. I mean, maybe he could have stayed in. I don't know. And there are people in the ostrich business still, but I just think there's so much, and I don't know that, I don't think I'm cut out to be a patient purebred breeder,
Sure.
And you got to be a salesman, and you got to be a good. And I think I'm maybe a people person, but I'm a terrible salesman, So
Sure. Yeah.
So but anyway, there's just a lot of factors, and I think but the other part of the good old American, if you want to do it, you can.
Oh yeah.
But you've got to do the things to. You can't just want it and then stop there.
Right. Well, and I think, just coming around to picking a direction and then stay in the course, and having that discipline to say, hey, I know exactly what it is I'm trying to do. So, I'd begin with the end in the mind. If you go clear all the way to okay, where is the commercial guy going to market these and figure that out?
Yeah. I'm
not talking for the whole industry. I'm talking for an individual breeder.
Yeah.
Like if an individual breeder is making the cattle, selling them to the commercial guy who then needs to sell them somewhere, figure out where he's going to go with those cattle, and then work backwards to why he'd want to plug them in, and then work backwards to what you need to make to where he'd want to plug them in. And then you got to work backwards to building that and proving that and understand that it's going to take a lot of dollars and a lot of time and a lot of years. And so, if you're just looking to jump in and because I have something cool, the whole world should reward me for it monetarily.
Right.
It is a little presumptuous. You know what I mean? For people to come in and just assume the whole world owes you a bunch of money because you have something cool. No, we need to look at the whole system and how am I adding value throughout it.
And you see. I look back. I've been like a cow magazine and a junkie and a sale catalog junkie since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I look back at the path is littered with purebred breeders who came in with a big flash.
Oh yeah.
And where are they now?
Right.
And there's
oh no, you're exactly right.
There's the other end of that spectrum too. There's
right.
Great generational families that have been producing great cattle for a long time. And but
I have seen the statistic released, and who knows how accurate it is or where I even remember seeing it. But I remember seeing the statistic released that the average length of operation for a purebred breeder is 7 years.
Yeah.
And that's taking into account that there are multiple operations north of 100 years old. You know what I mean? And so if the average is 7, and that there's north of 100 factoring in out, there's a pile of people that are in and out in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever that may be. They're in and out, they're in and out, they're in and out. And so I think if you really want, literally to physically make a difference in genetics, you have got to have enough time to get the animal here, to get their offspring here, to see what the offspring can do. You know what I mean? And even like we're talking today with the 12-year-old cow, and now we're going clear back, kind of closing the loop back, what was she bred? And how, and do we even know? All these pieces. And so if you're really legitimately going to make a difference in genetics, you've got to be committed for the long haul. It can't be I'm going to make a pile of money because XYZ did whatever, or these cattle did this here, or those cattle did those here. Look at your operation, your feed, your management, your market, your genetics, and the whole system of how is it going to add value for your client, and then translate that to what do you need to build for them, and then you got to build the whole thing. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money, which isn't what people are going to want to hear. I'm not being much of a salesman here, selling genetics. I'd sit here and tell it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to be a good breeder. But it does. I don't think if people come in with the mindset of this will take time and years dedicated to get where I'm going, they can and will get there. But if they come in and think they'll just be in and out, they will just be in and out.
And the older I get, the more time flies. Time goes off faster, so we you and I were talking earlier. So you are a really great example of how, and you're still pretty young, Seth. It may seem like it's taken a long time, but look, I was telling Jacob that look what Seth's done in the last few years. I hardly accomplished anything in that amount of time. but you, and I look at people like we talked about Larry Coleman of Coleman Angus.
Yes,
he's got an amazing story. Great people, and look at him. He's as reputable as anyone in the business. So it can be done, and he's not. He's younger than I am.
Sure. No, it absolutely can be done. And I think that would be what I'd hope, I guess, people would take away from this conversation we've had. And I so appreciate you taking time because I know you're calving and I know you got a million things to do and you're writing all these. And you're a family man. You got a lot going. So I really appreciate you taking the time. But when I sit and I look at all of it, one of the takeaways, or what I would hope would be a takeaway for anyone that has sat and listened to all of this, is that it can be done. but you're going to get where you're trying, in the sense of you're going to get where you're trying to go. Meaning if you're not trying to go anywhere or you don't know where you're going, that's exactly where you're going to get. It's a whole lot of nowhere, and you're going to spend a lot of money, and you're going to be in and out in a couple years, and it's going to be frustrating. But if you can come in, I think from the get-go with the intent being all the way to the end of it, like here's where the value is for my client, back to here's what I got to build to add value for him, and this is all the time and money it's going to take, but that it can be done if someone takes off and gets after it and starts into it. You had to start 12 years ago, right? I had to start 8 years ago, and pretty soon that does add up to all of a sudden either one of us will have been in it for decades or whatever else. But you had to have started at some point and started with some kind of a plan to implement. So anything else you'd toss out there before we close her?
Keep the faith. Keep the faith. Yep.
Love it.
And I always, we do a podcast with Progressive Cattle, and I always want to say when we sign off, be grateful for what you're doing. I mean, this is an amazing industry, and we're, I always say lucky, but it's more now. We're blessed. We are truly blessed to be doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. No, amen. I say we're blessed. We're fortunate to be able to do what we do, where we do. And even on the days that it is hard or it is frustrating or it seems daunting, we are so fortunate, so blessed to be where we're at.
So remember where that came from.
Love it. Love it. Appreciate you, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Seth.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Got Any Cows podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And visit us anytime at gotanycows.com.